Welcome back to the Off to College Blanket Crochet Along. I'm Ellen Gormley, and today I'm putting some squares together. So I've already put together many squares and created some fabric, but I need to add more, and so I thought I'd take the opportunity to show you how I'm doing it. Please see the previous tutorials on the Crochet Along playlist so that you can see exactly how to make each square, including this last edge, which is like a mosaic stitch. So it's a basic traditional granny square that we just changed up on the final round so that it would be a very beginner project my daughter and I are making together. Now on the back side of the piece, you can see the joining. And this gives us a clue about what joining I used. And so you can read your stitches after the fact and say, how did I do that again? Well, there's a little bit of a raised edge here. So this means it's crocheted together, it's not whip stitched. We are going to slip stitch the motifs together. Now these particular motifs happen to be very reversible because some rounds are worked on the right side and some are worked on the wrong. We switched sides. We turned our rounds on this particular blanket. So it's a little less critical what is the right side and the wrong side. This particular square was the first one I made, so I marked it so that it could be the model for us to make subsequent squares. And here's an additional square. And I like to call the right side either the middle or the outer edge. When it's the right side of that, it's the right side of the piece for me. That's my personal preference. So whatever you determine is the right side of your work, you're going to take the right sides and match them together. So if you're making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, the right sides are where the peanut butter and the jelly are, and you squish them together. So you're making a sandwich. The right sides, the good side, is together. So holding two pieces together, and often instructions will say something like crocheting through both thicknesses. And in this case, it means holding two pieces together, two motifs together, and crocheting through both thicknesses at the same time. For demonstration purposes, I'm using the white yarn just so you'll be able to see it better because navy blue can be kind of dark. I'm placing a slip knot on my hook, and I'm going to hold together the two pieces and match up the stitches. That's also a phrase that you might find in a pattern where it says matching stitches. And what that means is you want to have it mirror exactly. So if there's a 3-stitch group and a 3-stitch group, you want to make sure as you're working that they are lining up perfectly so that it will come out nice and even. Most of the time, patterns with motifs have corners of odd numbers. This particular pattern is a 3-chain corner, and so I am going to begin in the middle one of the corner. And because I have this seam here, can you see in the upper left of your screen, this you can see the edge of the motifs. That means I'm only using 2 loops instead of all 4. So 2 on one motif, 2 on the other. I'm going to slip stitch through the inner loops, beginning with the middle stitch of the chain 3/4 corner. So here's where I am. Just the inner loops, not all 4, not 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 on one and 2 on the other, but just the 2 middle ones that are closest to each other. I'm going to slip stitch by grabbing the yarn, pulling it through the stitches, get that yarn lined up, pull it through the stitches and through the loop on my hook. That's a slip stitch. And we will continue to do this all the way across, taking care to match stitches. So there's one more chain, because it was a chain 3 corner. I'm going to take the inner loop and the inner loop. And I find the chain sections the most persnickety. But then we come across our 3-stitch grouping. And so we will take just the inner loop of the first stitch of the group, taking care to match stitches. So we have 1 stitch, 2 stitch, 3 stitches. So we will have slip stitch, Do you see where I'm only grabbing the 2 inner loops? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm grabbing just the inner one and just the inner one and leaving the outer ones. And I'm doing it wrong. Look, friends, so let's talk about this. So by doing the inner loops only, I'm not seeing the outer loops, and I want to make sure it matches the rest of the blanket. So I'm going to pull back, and instead of doing the inner loops, I am going to do the outer loops. So hey, here's a lesson. Here's a bonus for you. Now you're getting 2 lessons in one, another method of joining. So instead, I'm going to grab the outer loop, and I'm going to go through the middle stitch, the outer loop. And what will happen now is when I open it back up, you'll see that line of unused stitches on the surface of the blanket. Really, friends, this was just a ploy to make the video longer. Just kidding. So we're going through the outer loops only this for real this time. So not touching those inner loops. We're skipping over them. We're still slip stitching. You could also single crochet, but slip stitching uses less yarn, and I like it. So of the group, when I'm matching stitches, let's take some care here. So I'm going to grab just the outer loop, skip the inner loop, skip the inner loop, and get the outer loop. And let's do a few more. And when you get to the chain 1 space, take the outer loop and the outer loop. And you will see when I open it up that this is the right method. Thanks for your patience, but this allowed you to learn 2 different methods, either the inner loop where you can't see the abandoned unused loop, or using the outer loops as such, so that when you open it up, you can see the unused loops create a line here. So it's a visual element, and it's a choice, and it's a choice you get to make. So you can choose either one, but I have chosen to do the outer loops when sandwiched right sides together, so that when I open it up, you can still see the lines of unused loops across the surface. Let's see, what else do I want to tell you about that? I did use the white yarn so that you could see it better. So here's the wrong side. So if you were to open it up using a contrasting yarn, you can see where the slip stitches are here, and it just grabs on the back side. So this also is very pretty if you wanted to put it on the front of the blanket. But if you want to put it on the back of the blanket, like I am doing, you sandwich the right sides together and work through the outer loops. You could also work through all 4 loops, and then you wouldn't have any vertical ridge, or sorry, not vertical ridge, but horizontal ridge across the surface of the blanket, like here. Okay. Either way, you can see the white is very not visible unless you really pull hard. The white is seen on the back side. So even though I'm showing you white for contrast so that you can see what I'm doing, it really is not all that visible from the front. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I want to thank my new subscribers, Katina and B and Shelly M and Joan K. So thank you all for joining me on this. Please check out all the other videos and playlists. Lots of good news coming up with the book, so stay tuned. Thank you so much. Bye. Hey, what are you doing? Okay.
dirty dog. What are you doing? Oh boy. Hey, Hobie.